Okay, I have a problem.
Go on. That's vague and broad, but hey, we're here to tackle problems.
So in the olden times, consoles were things that lived in the cabinet under my TV. And then I would, when I wasn't using the console, I would close the door. When I used the console, I'd open the door, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're nice and out of the way and you don't have to look at them, which I like. But now in the modern context, I have all these docks attached to my TV. I have one for the Steam Deck and I have one for the Switch and I have one for the Switch 2 because we are a mixed mode Switch 1 and Switch 2 family.
Wait, hang on. Most important question. Where is your Animal Crossing island?
We all have our own. We got multiple Switches because everybody wanted to make their own Animal Crossing island.
Right. Okay.
This is what we did with our Biden bonus in 2021 or whatever that was.
That's one way to tackle it. Sure.
Yeah. So here's the problem though. Well, okay. One of them is easy because Gina doesn't ever use the Switch on the TV. So her dock is just the places she plugs in her Switch to charge. Right. So she's a handheld only.
Yeah. Real quick to define the problem. You need vertical lifting space. Is that correct?
I need vertical lifting space, but ideally I want something I don't have to look at. But also I do like playing games on the TV. So I want to be able to use it attached to the TV occasionally.
Sure. My instinct is to say, just put the docks behind the TV. But then you have to
nope.
Contort your spine in a curve around the TV to get to the dock.
Yeah, and also the TV is too close to the wall. This doesn't work. So what do people do? Like I have a Steam Deck dock and a Switch 2 dock. The Switch 1 dock's going to go away because the kiddo and I are both Switch 2'd up now.
Wait, you have two Switch 2s?
Yeah.
Man.
Well,
you have two Switch 2s to my 0?
I mean, look, I'm a professional games person.
Oh, okay. What's that like?
It's up and down. Doesn't pay great.
My girlfriend literally just got back from Costco 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Sent me a photo of stacks and stacks of Switch 2s at Costco.
She wants a Switch 2, clearly.
I should have had her just pick one up.
Look, here's the thing. That Animal Crossing update's coming. Right?
True. Yeah.
Right. There's now jockeying going on in the house because right now my daughter's island is on her Switch Lite still. And my wife's island is on her Switch OLED.
Okay. And
my island is on my original Switch. So there's 2 available slots for new islands right now.
Okay.
And even though they've given like the Resetti powers to get rid of the flower problem that plagues every island that hasn't been touched in 3 years exists now as of January, it's still a problem. Everybody wants a clean start. So 2 of us are going to get to have their brand new island. And then I'm never going to play Animal Crossing again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that
sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I do.
Yeah. What do you do?
Now that there are some prerequisites to this.
Okay.
Or there's one prerequisite, which is to have very large floor standing speakers.
Yeah.
Switch dock sits on top of a floor speaker. Real nice.
Yeah. But the problem is I don't want to see it. I definitely don't want multiples.
At that point, what else are you going to put on top of your speaker?
I have Wall-E and the BDRE on my speakers.
Okay.
They're both made of Lego.
You may be constructing an impossible set of requirements here.
Look, I'm a simple man.
Accessible and again, we need aerial landing space over the dock. But invisible, like accessible but not seen, obscured by things. I'm not sure that maybe a pick one or the other.
I just had an idea.
Okay.
I think if I drill a hole in the floor and run a long HDMI cable down through the crawl space, I could bring it back up at my chair.
Okay.
And then the Switch dock just plugs in next to my chair so I can seamlessly transition.
I love this.
From playing on the TV to playing in my hands.
Now, there are length limitations on the HDMI cable, especially depending on which Switch we're talking about and what signal is coming out of it.
It's funny you mentioned this because I did a video about this at PC World. If you can get a passive one-way HDMI cable.
Oh, sure. You get a fiber HDMI cable.
Yeah, that's 50 up to 50 meters.
I have one, as a matter of fact.
Yep. I can do a lot less than that because it won't be 50 meters.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem is I'll have to drill a real big hole to get the HDMI cable through the end point through because it's not like Ethernet where you can just run the cable up and then put the ends on for HDMI, I don't think.
I have good news for you.
Yeah, what's up?
You own your house.
That's true.
You own that floor.
That's true.
You can put as many holes in that floor as you want.
I don't want to have a way for the snails to get from the snail. Have I not told you about the snail Gogotha under my crawl space?
What the fuck? No.
So, look, it sometimes gets a little wet in there when it rains. When we have a big, like 3 inches of rain in one day, and then dormant snail eggs hatch, and then they're under there and there's nothing to eat because it's, you know, snails. And then they just let loose the mortal coil after they make a bunch of big shells after they've eaten all the whatever grows on the mud down there. And then it's just like when you crawl around, it's just the remnants of snails that have let loose the mortal coil that are just crunching their bones under your knees and hands as you're belly crawling through the muck.
That doesn't sound so bad.
It's not great.
You get snails when it rains. We get ants.
Yeah,
I think I would take the snails, honestly.
We get ants too. Ants are you gotta put a barrier, a deadly poison barrier around your domicile.
Wait, what kind of poison are we talking?
Anti-ant poison.
Such as?
I don't know. It's they touch it and then they.
Well, I guess I'll get right on that.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
My levels look a little scary, but it's I don't see any peaking, so I'm going to say it's fine.
This is the joy of doing your own audio engineering.
It's true.
This podcast is a two-man operation.
What I should do is teach my daughter to be an audio engineer.
Yes, make her earn her keep.
Yeah.
Make her earn that Animal Crossing island.
She could be like the Rizzler of podcasting. For
every hour she spends adjusting knobs on your mixer while you podcast, that's another hour.
$2.
Yep. There you go. That's a healthy conversion rate.
$2 an hour. That's totally reasonable. She looked at me and she's like, "Dad, $2 isn't gonna buy anything."
What is your? I mean, do you have ant materials that you rely on?
Ant materials?
Yeah, I like cinnamon. Cinnamon's very good at disrupting their. What?
Cinnamon's tigers, man.
No. It disrupts their scent trails. It doesn't kill them. Whatever like chemical signifiers animal or ants drop,
pheromones or whatever. Yeah.
You know, the way they form their conga lines, I guess.
So I go to the Ace Hardware in my neighborhood and I ask the old guy there, what's the deadliest shit that they have for ants?
Oh, it's borax.
No, borax. They're wise to the borax here. They don't eat the borax anymore. They'll just look. They'll walk right by it and look at it.
Oh, well, touching the borax is what you want, though. Like, yeah, borax does bad things to ants.
Yeah, they eat it and it disrupts their tum-tums.
Well, it also, like, let's say you vacuum up a little bit of borax into a hand vac.
Yeah. And
then vacuum up all the ants that are flooding your house.
Wow, that is grim.
They don't last long. And I feel terrible doing it, honestly.
They're ants.
When there are hundreds of ants in your house, what other choice do you have?
The worst thing one of the worst things I've ever seen as a homeowner is when we had our house cleaned a few years ago. The guys were using like a soap on the like a mild soap on the outside of the house, basically. And the soap ran down around the edges of my patio, the concrete patio in the backyard. And when apparently there were a billion ants living under there, and it was like a scene in an Indiana Jones movie when it's like snakes, except for it was all ants. Like you couldn't see the concrete. There were so many ants that came up.
Oh my God.
Was a nightmare.
It was like driving them out of their tunnel network.
They did not like the soap. It's funny because it doesn't happen when it rains. It was something about the soap that the cleaners use. But anyway, we get a really toxic poison and use that to keep the ants from coming in.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Solves the problem.
Yeah, but you know what? There's one problem.
What?
There's always more ants.
There are infinite supply of ants.
Anyway, I'm so dude, I am so sick of thinking about ants. Let's talk about anything else.
Yeah. Hey, what about a theory of fun?
Oh,
how's that sound?
I like fun.
I was reading the internet this morning, as one does, and I came across Raph Koster's blog. Raph Koster, for folks who don't know, is a game designer who worked on such games as Ultima Online and a little bit of EverQuest, but mostly when he was at Verant, it was Star Wars Galaxies was the thing he was known for.
That's like three very seminal online games right there.
Yeah, and to be clear, Raph wrote a book called A Theory of Fun, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago now. That's like a children's, I think he illustrated it himself, but it's like illustrated like a children's book, but it basically explains what it's it's his shot at defining what a game is.
Yeah. I've never met him before, but he might be the first game designer that I can remember who seemed to be approaching the topic of game design from sort of an academic angle, he was the first one I was seeing like, oh, he's doing talks on and he's written books on and et cetera, like kind of really breaking down analytically the science, if you want to call it that, of designing fun and engaging games.
Before like the NYU game design seminar was in effect or any of that stuff, Raph was keeping it real in Star Wars Galaxies by making a game that was basically just Life Simulator, but in Star Wars. It was very much a predecessor to I like everything from like Power Wash Simulator and Home Repair Simulator and all those kinds of weird, hey, here's a piece of life that some people don't get to access, so we're going to make a video game about it stuff. It just like the things you were replicating were, oh, I'm going to be a Twi'lek dancer, or I'm going to be a smuggler, or I'm going to be a medic, or whatever. Like the jobs were boring. The game didn't do great, is my understanding. Other than like, had it not been a Star Wars game, it would have been shut down in like 15 minutes, I think. But but I read this article. The article is called "Game Design is Simple," actually, and it's interesting. He talks about the biological basis for fun and why people enjoy games and stuff like that, which was interesting.
There is a depiction of a dopamine molecule in the first 500 words of this article.
But
so it's that kind of thing. But I guess we should say this article is kind of a 20 plus year later follow up to Theory of Fun, or he links to it. He links to it right at the beginning and kind of expanding on some of the concepts in that book.
But the point of this is that when I was reading this, we started talking about old games and how online went over the last 30-ish years at this point has gone from being like when we were kids, getting to play a game with a multiplayer, getting to play a multiplayer game with somebody who was like as good at games as you were was a rare treat.
Oh yeah. That was a like sleeping over at my friend's house this weekend, or my cousin from 2 hours away is coming up for Thanksgiving. Like it was a definitely not an everyday thing, like kind of a every maybe once a month if you were lucky kind of thing.
Yeah. And like God bless her, my grandmother would always play games with me. She would, she was always down to play. She was always, she was a computer person, but like a UNIVAC ENIAC type computer person, not a.
That's the best kind of computer person.
I mean, in retrospect, I wish I had asked her a lot more questions than I did. But she would play, like she would play 2-player stuff, but she was terrible at video game, like just abysmally bad. And so, yeah, it was sleepovers and like birthday parties and stuff like that. And also there weren't a whole lot. Like there was stuff like when I went to college, we were playing like Madden and NHL and those kinds of like EA classic 16-bit sports games. But like there weren't, like Doom didn't exist at that point. Right. And Doom came out and it was a LAN game in the LANs at my school. But, like nobody could play it in their room with other people. It was just a single player thing. So the idea today is we're going to do kind of a brief history of online games and kind of hit the high points, hit those inflection points where everything changed. And we're going to talk about some stuff. There's some stuff we're not going to talk about. Like we're not going to talk about the weird online or satellite based delivery mechanisms for 16-bit games that were mostly in Japan, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say the word Satellaview here shortly, but that's not a focus, and that's not online gaming either. I mean, that is remote connectivity on a game console, but not for the purpose of playing with people.
Yeah, it was just for downloading like 256 kilobyte games, right?
Yeah, or I mean, they made like a special version of Zelda for that thing, actually. So like
really,
there were interesting games for it, but still explicitly a local only thing once you downloaded the games. The one other thing that comes to mind that we don't have written in the notes here is arcades early on.
Oh yeah,
I mean. That is still very much in fact, that is the ultimate version of you have to be in the same room with people because everybody has to go to a public space and pay money to play together.
Did like those BattleTech pods were networked, but they were just local, right?
Yeah. The BattleTech centers were just like effectively LANs before people really knew colloquially what the word LAN was.
And eventually, like LAN parties, like there was a real kind of prior to broadband being widely available. there was a huge, like there was a LAN party going on in a major city somewhere in the United States pretty much every weekend in like 1997, right? 96, 97. And then that stuff all kind of died out as people started getting broadband. Like like to go to a LAN party at that time, like I went to DC Con a few times, which was in Washington, DC, unsurprisingly. And it was like you paid $30 to get in, and that $30 got you half of a 4-foot section of a folding table and a folding chair, or some people, the fancy people, brought their own chairs. But then you would lug in your beige tower and your 17-inch CRT and a pair of headphones, and you would sit there and you'd play Command and Conquer. And like honestly, there was usually some sort of network server with a bunch of shareware, air quoting the shareware, pirate versions of games in a lot of cases.
Oh yeah, I've never been to a LAN party, but the stories were legendary of all the downloading and swapping of pirated games, and I assume pornography and other such things.
It was pornography, anime. Like that was the first place I saw Dragon Ball. Probably was at a LAN party. Okay. There was just dudes that would come and they'd set up their computers. They'd just sit and watch Dragon Ball. There was almost always somebody who brought a significant other. Typically, it was like a teenage girlfriend who was really upset that like there would be a bad breakup or two at LAN parties. Like it was like summer camp with no counselors or nobody really in charge. And a lot of people would just dump their like I was in my probably late teens, early 20s. I was in college when I went to the DC cons, and I was probably in the sweet spot in terms of ages of people. But there were definitely some kids that were too young to be there, and there were definitely some creepy old guys,
great,
probably 15 years younger than I am now. So it was seedy in a way that, like, you know, a lot of stuff at that time wasn't so much.
Dude, I bet it was open network shares for miles at that point, right?
Like if somebody had a worm, it would have been just nasty. And yeah, everybody had open network shares. You just go hit people's machines and see what they had.
Yeah, I'm sure there was zero authentication going on, right? It was just ever like hit browse for networks and network shares, and
yeah, that would have been like
300 of them or whatever. Because that's
Windows 98 or NT4 days.
Yeah, like that's how it was when I got to college. You know, like that was kind of still at the tail end of like the dorm was you could like just browse for public network shares and find like dozens of them from people's machines on the LAN.
And I don't think they segmented the LAN. And the other thing about this is oftentimes the reason they do the file servers is people like they didn't have internet connections, because like getting an internet connection for 200 people would have cost a fortune.
Yeah, it was basically impossible. It was functionally kind of impossible unless they brought like a T1 in or something, right?
Yeah, but that would have cost $5,000, and like it's not going to make sense for the weekend. So yeah, the file servers were there ostensibly to hold patches, so you could all get on the same version of whatever game you were trying to play. Anyway, and this was all, of course, before Steam or any of that stuff. So it was like you had a CD, you put it in the drive, then you downloaded the patch from File Planet or the file server or whatever.
Yes, but well after the point at which we were going to start.
Yeah,
here. In
the beginning.
Yes,
that's just what I had. That's all I got. We started in the early 90s. It's probably the beginning for me.
We've got a little bit of prehistory in the notes. I mean, we talked about, like it was going to other people's houses to play games on consoles.
Yeah.
I think it is worth noting that consoles typically required some kind of relatively expensive add-on to play more than 2 players at one time.
Yeah, until the N64 and the Dreamcast.
Or if you had a TurboGrafx, an adapter to play more than one person at a time. Because the TurboGrafx shipped with literally one controller port on it.
Look, this might be a hot take, Brad. I don't think the TurboGrafx was a very good console.
Let's say it probably punched above its weight in some cases, but sure, I think you're probably right. But the point is, it was consoles at people's houses, and you were lucky to get more than 2 players at once. It was arcades, and it was MUDs.
Well, so there were MUDs, and when online services started, like BBSs or later stuff like AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe, there were some online games in those types of situations. But yeah, MUDs, for people who don't know, MUD stands for multi-user dungeon. They're basically, imagine multiplayer Zork that in some cases.
Dude, hang on, I have to stop you.
Yeah.
I fear we are maybe old enough at this point that we can't even just drop the Zork reference without spelling out the fact that Zork was a text-only game.
Yeah, so in order to do things in Zork, you said like you had 2-word commands. It was like go west or turn left or look around, and you interacted with a text-based world using text, and sometimes there were pictures that were kind of like tied to individual rooms or whatever.
Yeah, but at its most basics, the Zork style text parser game was quite literally just white text on a black background, and you just typed what you were doing. It was kind of like an interactive, I don't want to say novel exactly, but it was extremely imagination based, let's say.
Yeah, and in the early to mid 80s, there were late 80s even, there were a lot of these. Like there was a Douglas Adams version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that was text based. There were games in the adventure series like Adventure and Pirate Adventure and stuff like that. There were a bazillion of these. And then Muds took that basic framework and then would put like a D&D based RPG adventure on top of it, right? That you could go in with your friends. So you would go in, and this all usually took place on like VAX or Unix machines, or sometimes BBSs, I guess. And you would start in a place, you'd have shared inventories, you could pass things around, but it was all text based, and they ranged from like extremely gamey and like hardcore role players, like some of the Star Wars ones specifically were like, if you didn't role play effectively, they would just kick you out and ban you, and you'd have to make a new account, to things like Lambda Moo, which was a user extensible mud. So like you could, for example, if you got somebody to give you permission in their room, you could hook your room onto like a lantern or something in their room. And like, so there was a kind of status based on how close you were to the main loading room where everybody started. And that was a really social, like that thing was basically like IRC with user configurable rooms, and also weird dungeons that just people would just build whole campaigns that just branched off of the main structure of the Moo.
What was the networking scope of the average Mud, or at least the early Mud? Like this was pre-widespread internet access. Was it like local to whatever university you were at or something?
Well, so I didn't use them until probably 94, I would guess, was the first time I found a Mud. And they were online at that point. There was an article in Wired about Muds at one point, and they listed like 4 that were then immediately impossible to get into, but that led a bunch of people to other stuff like Lambda Moo and the Star Wars Muds and stuff like that.
Like just quick Wikipedia skim. It seems like the earliest Muds were at kind of universities and were confined to those lands, of course.
Yeah, it makes sense. But the heyday for Muds was like pre-Windows 95, post Endless September.
Looks like CompuServe had at least one.
Yeah, so CompuServe and AOL were interesting, and Prodigy, and those kind of big. They weren't exactly, they were ISPs, but they also provided other services too. Like AOL provided a less internet experience, so they filtered out some of the bad stuff, and like they at least in the beginning, before it was like unlimited usage while you're on, they had games that cost money to play while you were playing them. So like some BBSs would charge you based on time spent in a game. CompuServe definitely did that. So if you started the wrong thing, you could end up racking up like $50 or $100 worth of game time by playing these games on their servers. So the people who knew better were kind of like, hey man, I'm just going to go play a Mud on the internet where it's real. But if you were on CompuServe and didn't know better, then you would probably do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're past the text days. It's the early 90s.
Yes, I will. Real quick, I'll jump in here and just mention in a little more detail I guess what I would call like early experiments with console network connectivity. But again, this was not, in both cases, this was not for the purpose of playing with other people. Super Famicom, only in Japan, not outside of Japan. So Super Nintendo never got this. Had the Satellaview add-on, which was a satellite modem.
That's crazy.
And I've never spent a ton of time looking at a Satellaview. I'm like vaguely aware of it. My understanding, though, is that all of the games you got through it were exclusive. There might have been some. Maybe there were some SNES games or Super Famicom games that were also at retail that you could download through this thing. But most of the games I'm familiar with on the Satellaview were exclusive to the system.
That's wild.
And I don't think you could keep them as long as you wanted either.
I think they stayed until you powered off, right?
I'm not sure. Actually, no, because some of these games on this table I'm looking at have a unique broadcast weeks listing.
Wow.
And most of these are between 1 and 4 weeks long, so you might have only been able to keep them for that long. I'm not actually sure.
Talk about FOMO. Again,
it's a little out of the scope of, we're talking about online multiplayer here, but there was a remake of Zelda 1 for Super Famicom available exclusively through this Satellaview.
That's wild.
So that's kind of like It's BS Legend of Zelda.
What's the BS stand for?
I'm not sure. A lot of the games have a BS prefix on them, and I've never actually known what that stood for. Anyway,
if that's the Japanese. Anyway,
it's possible. But anyway, this was a giant thing you could plug into a Super Famicom and get satellite sort of uplink connectivity with it.
Does that mean Nintendo made dishes? Is there like a Nintendo branded satellite dish out there?
Don't actually know.
That's wild. I guess you could tell who had the Satellaview because you'd see the dish on their house. You'd be like, oh, hell yeah, that's my Famicom, Super Famicom dish. I'm going to go over to Steve's house.
Oh, yes. Okay. User required a separate purchase or rental of a satellite dish and receiver.
Wow.
So not a small investment to get this stuff.
Hard to believe it didn't work out.
Yes. There was also the Sega channel, which was kind of similar, except it was over coax cable.
Yeah, Sega was kind of all in on the internet. They had the thing for the Genesis that I think nobody realistically had. But then they did a modem for the Saturn, and then the Dreamcast came with one built in, right?
Yes, the Dreamcast shipped with a modem built in. The Sega channel was just a way to download games over cable, effectively. And I don't know a ton about the Saturn modem and what the capability was there, but Dreamcast, I feel like by the time Dreamcast came out, most people at least kind of knew what dial-up internet was.
Yeah, Dreamcast came out in 97 or 98. It was late.
99.
99. Everybody knew by then.
The famous Dreamcast release date, 9/9/99.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Like they were doing multiplayer servers and stuff like that by the Dreamcast time, which I think we'll get to. That's like in the future.
Yes. Getting out of order here just a little bit. But
in 1993, when Doom came out, it was an IPX game locally, but you could play modem to modem. It had modem play, as did most of the shooters that came after that, right? So
yeah,
Duke Nukem, Rise of the Triad, as well as like multiplayer RTSs like Warcraft 2 and Command and Conquer and Red Alert and all those kinds of games.
I think it topped out at 4 players on an IPX network?
4 players on IPX network for Doom for sure. And
then necessarily, of course, it was only head to head over a modem.
Yeah, actually, I think Doom eventually had 8 players, but that might have been later. Descent also was a popular modem to modem game, and like we had at my university, we had a message board where you could put your phone number up to if you wanted to play multiplayer games with people. Like there was a cork board, you just jammed a card with your phone number on, which is really funny in retrospect.
That's fun. I've certainly never done this, but I know Doom supported this, and I assume a good number of other games as well. You could play over null modem cable head to head as well.
Yeah, you could. You needed so it was like a serial cable, but 2 of the pairs were reversed so that the send on one was lined up with the receive on another. Right.
But that obviously is kind of dragging 2 computers basically into the same room or down the hall from each other.
Well, it was a LAN party. It let you have a 2-person LAN party in a world where like network cards were still $200 or $300 at that point.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like they weren't built into the motherboard yet. Right.
But every computer had a serial port.
Every computer had a serial port. Yeah.
I think I've probably said this before, but Doom head to head against my friend across town over the modem, I am quite sure is the first time I ever saw somebody move around in a game on my screen when they were, when they were miles away from me. Like foundational, mind blowing moment.
When it didn't move like a player, like a NPC, basically.
Yes. Like seeing a character moving around and knowing it was my friend across town moving the character was just like, that was it, man.
Well, and the characters moved a lot faster than the NPCs did. So it was a real thing. I used to play with my friend Marty, and we both had 14.4 modems. When it was time to upgrade, we bought these janky, I've talked to this in the podcast before. We bought these janky modems that would let you basically split half of the bandwidth for a GSM audio call and then use the other half for a modem.
Oh.
So we would talk to each other while we had voice while we were shooting. We had headsets that plugged into the modem, which was really weird.
I assume you were just getting like half the bandwidth that you would.
Yeah, but it was
like
fine.
9600 baud or something like that.
Yeah, it was fine for the game purposes.
Like, games don't move a lot of data, right? The latency is important in multiplayer gaming, but throughput is not as much.
Well, and Doom and most of these games were peer-to-peer games. So there wasn't a server, there wasn't a client. It was everybody was running on the same data, and if it desynced, then you had to reconnect.
Yeah,
and also strangely, most of these games had dialers and stuff built in, so they were DOS games. Like it wasn't like you were connecting to each other with Windows or something. and then you would switch over to the game. It was just like you loaded it up and you had to put your modem strings into the game and know the person's phone number and type it in.
The game did the dialing. In fact, like now that you mentioned that, like moving the network stack out of the game itself into a more generalized platform on which the game was running is like kind of one of the actual
that's the first one. Yeah.
Big points of evolution as this stuff matured.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick before we move on though, my other story, I've probably mentioned this before too. My cousin who lived about 2 hours away, who I mentioned earlier, like loved Warcraft 2.
Oh, who didn't?
Had absolutely nobody to play it with. He volunteered. I mean, I was certainly grateful for this. He volunteered to eat all of the long distance fees for as much as I would play that game with him.
Wow.
So
that's a friend.
Cannot even imagine how much he racked up in long distance fees playing that game, but it was fun.
Well, so around this time, Descent, like I said, Descent wrought all the build games, Doom, Warcraft, the Raven, Hexen, or Heretic, I guess, games. All you could play modem to modem. There were also a handful of modem to LAN FPS services. Some BBSs would do this, where you could like basically tunnel into a BBS and then use that to do like an IPX portal or something to give you multiplayer. There were also some dedicated services like Dwango, and then there was Kali, which was a kind of shareware thing that did the same thing. That's more the other way. That's more for playing IPX games on TCP/IP networks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like you could, even if you had just a modem and weren't on a LAN, you could play Doom with 4 players, which I remember doing a couple of times. But also Dwango was like $15 a month back then, which was an incredible amount of money in 1993 or 94, whenever that was.
So like Dwango was a centralized service that you dialed into.
They had local nodes though. Dwango did. So like you had to have, like, most of them were in bigger cities than I lived in. So like Knoxville, I think, had one ISP you could call in, but like if you looked at what they had in Dallas or Houston or DC or New York, it would be like hundreds, dozens of nodes. So yeah.
But the reason I bring that up though is that Dwango was like a big commercial service. Kali was just shareware though. So like, what were you dialing into?
Well, so Kali was more, it was more, like I said, it was for letting you play IPX protocol games on TCP/IP networks. It was the other way.
Oh, duh. Right. Okay. That was Kali. Yeah. Kali was you already have an active internet connection.
Yeah. That was like if you lived in the LAN and you wanted to play Doom, but your network didn't have IPX running on it, you could play, or they were blocking IPX. And then Quake happened, which we talk about Quake here a lot. Quake, it turns out, is foundational for a lot of technologies.
I think we did a whole episode about Quake's 25th birthday, didn't we? So we probably don't need to belabor too much of that material, but I still contend I think Quake is the most influential game of all time. As much for the technologies that it spawned and made popular as for any game design elements.
Yeah, like being the first real 3D accelerated game, or the first, like, there were other 3D accelerated things before, but it was the one that matters.
Yes, it was the one that sold cards. I mean, I've done this spiel before, but 3D acceleration, full 3D worlds, mods, custom maps,
mouse controls,
mouse look, skins, client-side prediction with like when Quake World came out,
portals that let you go from one server to the other.
Like I'm pretty sure it was the first-person shooter that worked over TCP/IP out of the box. I could be wrong about that. I'm not saying it was the first game to work over TCP/IP.
I think Dark Forces had a TCP/IP mode before. Maybe
that was modem only.
That was modem only.
Yes,
okay,
definitely.
I don't know. I'm sure there's something, but for all, like, look, it was the first client server first person shooter I played.
Yeah.
It was the first thing that had client side prediction, so that meant that like you could play on high lag connections and you'd have a pretty good experience. All that stuff, but it didn't work with modem to modem, and it required TCP/IP, which was. It's funny, when they released the test, it required a specific a specific network card to work.
Was it network card or TCP/IP stack?
Both,
I believe, wasn't it? I'm pulling from the memory banks here. Was it the Beam and Whiteside?
That seems something like that. Something started with B for sure.
TCP/IP.
Anyway,
yes, Beam and Whiteside software.
Yeah,
I think that was the only network stack that thing worked with. Anyway,
that was because that's what they used at the offices. It did.
Yeah. That was the whole story of that game. Like the whole reason Quake World happened, like the big John Carmack apology and plan file that he wrote was, sorry, I have a T1 to my house. I didn't realize what the lag was going to be like. This game over a modem.
Wow.
Anyway, like, suffice to say that like Quake is kind of the inflection point for multiplayer gaming, from primordial beginnings to, some early version of what we would recognize today.
Yeah, it was, well, it was one of the, it was the first time that anybody did a server client game. And that means it was also the first time that somebody shipped server code for their game that anybody could run, right? So you were able to download a piece of software from id's FTP site and run your own Quake server. And there was a whole configuration file. There were mod support, all this other stuff we talked about before. But that client server thing, it turns out, was an important concept. And it comes up because after that, pretty much everything became client server. There's hardly any peer-to-peer stuff for a really long time.
Yep. And that leads right into, I guess, is EverQuest like, well, sorry, I was going to say, is EverQuest the first MMO, but no, Ultima Online was before that.
Well, then there was stuff before that too, but Ultima Online was the first commercial thing that was wildly successful. It was a kind of isometric top-down MMO that was kind of weirdly open-ended. Like it like Star Wars Galaxies Later, which we talked about a little bit ago. It didn't exactly tell you what to do. Like it shipped with a manual and a map of the world, and then it would ask you some questions, and you chose some stuff, and then it would dump you out in a forest someplace, and you just end up punching trees for a while until you got enough wood to maybe make a bow.
The original tree puncher.
I mean, kind of, yeah. It's funny. My experience playing UO, I bought it. I was like, this looks cool. I've never played an Ultima game before. Online seems neat. I went home. I looked at the manual on the way home, and it was like, hey, if you want to be a knight, you should probably consider blacksmithing, and you'll need ore if you want a blacksmith. So go get good at mining.
I'm sorry. Can I just stop you for a second? Can I quote you on that? Online seems neat.
Online seems neat. Yeah.
I once thought as you do.
I mean, look, it was a simpler time, Brad.
It sure was.
But so I punched some rock out of the walls, or pickaxed some rock out of the walls. I loaded it up on my backpack. I was super encumbered. I walked from there to town where the forge was, and there's like one bridge where you're out of the no PvP zone.
I'm getting excited. I know where this is going
on that path. And I immediately got murked with like 6 hours or 4 hours or something, some incredible amount of time punching rocks.
Amazing.
And so I logged out and never played it again.
Really?
Yeah, that was it. I was like, this game is wasting my time at a high level. F these guys.
Well, that's, I might have had a similar response if I'd had something like that happen. Like these days, I think back on Ultima Online as like, man, I wish I'd had that experience. I never touched it. I was just like, that seems like such a foundational.
It had a monthly fee too. It's worth saying that it was $10 a month to play Ultima Online.
That's certainly. I mean, I just was also never into Ultima, so I just was not attracted to it to begin with. But also, the idea of a monthly fee for a game was pretty rough at that time.
It was insane. And the fact that it was a game where you were going to be abused by the other players for $10 a month was like, I didn't have time for that.
And that's what makes it so notable in historical context, because the entire evolution of these types of games, right up until now, with like maybe extraction shooters starting to move back in that more savage, anything goes direction. But like that was a game that like did it before the rules had been established, before they had put up the guardrails that would ensure people had a good time, because you clearly did not.
I actually think when that game launched, they might not have had no PvP zones. I can't remember. I feel like there was a legacy of older kind of proto MMO mud things that I can never remember the name of the famous one, but I think it's Meridian 59, 1996 video game developed by Archetype Interactive and published by the 3DO company. It was the first 3D graphically MMO, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and ran for years and years and years from the people who made Niantic eventually.
Oh, wait,
yeah.
What?
Yeah. John Hankey was on the development team. Yeah.
Niantic people made Meridian 59? Really?
That's what it says.
Wild.
The director was Charles Sellers. I didn't know that. That's wild. Anyway. So yeah, it wasn't the first one of these, but it was the first one that like you could go buy in the store and stuff like that. And then like sometime after that, multiplayer became much more common and much less of a weird thing. Yeah,
like if you look at the timeline, I always think UO came out later, but it was 97, which was only a year after Quake. And at that point, like Diablo was, I think, 96. I think that was the same year as Quake.
And I guess the difference between Ultima Online and Quake is Quake was a single player game that also had multiplayer. Ultima Online, you could only play if you paid the fee and played online.
Yes, with other people.
Yeah.
But like Diablo came out around the same time. It had BattleNet. StarCraft came out in 98, also had BattleNet. Like those games were, if not multiplayer first, like extremely multiplayer centric. And Diablo 2, even more so than the first Diablo. Like it was was definitely a period where like every big game coming out, it felt like, with the exception of like point and click adventure games, like all the biggest games coming out were starting to incorporate multiplayer very rapidly.
I remember reading a lot of interviews back then, and the conversation would be, well, what's your multiplayer mode like? And as a result, we got a bunch of really weird single player games that had really, really weird multiplayer modes.
Tell me about Z multiplayer.
So it's funny you say that you viewed those as multiplayer games. I never played StarCraft or Diablo online.
Really? I never played Diablo a lot, period, in the 90s for whatever reason, but StarCraft was, I mean, I played through the StarCraft campaign and loved it. It was absolutely a classic game on those merits alone. But
yeah,
but StarCraft very much became a multiplayer game for me after that.
Diablo 2 was when I started playing Diablos, and I spent a lot of time playing that, but I played it when I was living with somebody in San Francisco and we played on a LAN. So, okay. So then EverQuest came out. That was 99.
Yes. And it's like kind of crazy to think that we got from Quake to EverQuest in 3 years.
Yeah, because EverQuest was a 3D massively multiplayer online game in the vein of Meridian 59, but it was wildly popular. I think maybe more in the game development spaces than in the general populace, because when you talk to game developers now, everybody played EverQuest if they're of a certain age. But it was a 3D, looked kind of like Quake, like low poly characters, 3D world, but with the trappings of an RPG around it. Like it had buttons on windows, like an old Ultima or like an old RPG. And it was truly enormous numbers of people, but you could play it on a relatively modest computer with a 3D accelerator and a modem. And
much like Ultima Online was extremely willing to waste your time in large quantities. Like EverQuest is the MMO where infamously you lost experience when you died. Like, yeah, I never played EverQuest, but like you, I
played EverQuest.
Well, then I'm sure you know this way better than I do, but you would hear the stories about like you could die in such a way that the gear you had on you could no longer use because you had de-leveled to the point that you were not high enough level to use your equipped gear anymore.
Well, okay, so EverQuest came out of MUDs, and a lot of the MUDs were really opaque because they were made for weirdos, right? And so the people who made EverQuest didn't do things like put text in the game that explained what spells do. You had to try them out to see what happened.
See, that sounds amazing to me now.
It was in many ways, it was very it was very future looking in like an experimental way. Now, was it punishing? Yeah. Were there some levels that required as much XP as every level that you'd gotten up until that point? Yeah. Did they put a bunch of bosses in the game that they didn't think anybody would be able to beat just to see if it would work out? Yeah. Were there zones that you could get into that didn't have safe spots at the entrance? Oh, absolutely. So like you'd zone into a raid zone and you had to get the people who had good connections to go in first so that they could like set up a beachhead basically.
Wow.
And like one time when we were doing one of the raids, it was Plane of Fear, Plane of Hate or something like that. We wiped at such a high level that we couldn't get back in to get our bodies. And we had to get another guild to come in and help us. So there were like 80 people packed in there, all just getting owned constantly. What was the pathing in that game so bad that if you walked into some of the zones and just fired off an AoE spell and then zoned out, it would train every monster in the zone to the entrance? Yeah, 100%. Was it truly incredible and in like a punishing way that I would never tolerate now? Oh yeah, absolutely. Like there was a spell that I had on my main character that I didn't know what it did until the 3rd or 4th expansion came out.
That's amazing.
It was like a launch spell. It's like I got it on the 4th day I played.
Incredible.
It was an aggro debuff for the record. So you could shrink the aggro radius, but like it's not visible. You don't have any way of knowing, but it became clear that you needed that to pull to like some of the best moments in that game were pulling singles off of like a raid boss. So you'd get all the ads, you'd pull them, you had to kill them in less than the respawn time so you could then tag the boss. And anyway, the game is incredible. Also, no one should play EverQuest.
And yet many people still do.
Yeah, but okay, so EverQuest launched, they sold 10,000 copies on day one, which when you read the interviews about this now, they're like, yeah, it was a huge number. And it's really funny in 2025 to think about 10,000 copies being a huge number of copies of the game sold. According to this PC Gamer article about the dawn of the MMO breaking the internet, the story of EverQuest, the MMO that changed everything. They had so much traffic into their data center, which was just a cold room with a couple computers in it in San Diego, that they shut down the main pipe in and out of San Diego.
Yeah, first of all, I don't think we can even use the word data center because I assume were these servers just on the premises in their office?
It said a server room that was really cold. So I assume it was like, I think about that. Remember that old server room that was upstairs at the CNET headquarters back in the old days?
Oh, yeah.
I think that.
Yeah, probably something like that. I mean, were they, I can't remember if they were part of Sony at that time or not.
They were not yet.
Okay.
Sony had famously cut them loose because they thought this was going to be a debacle,
right,
and then bought them back immediately when it launched.
Right. So this is like, I mean, this is not only pre-data center, I assume. This is probably like pre-colocation as a just like turnkey solution that anybody could pay for. Maybe that sort of thing existed by this time, but
there were co-location places by that point, but like
it was still pretty grassroots, presumably, compared to now, or even compared to like 5 years later when World of Warcraft came out.
Yeah, the thing that they said in that PC Gamer article is they were talking about like the servers crashing every few hours, so like 3 guys had to stay in the room and just walk around pressing the buttons when they rebooted.
In parkas is what the story says.
Yeah,
like they literally were wearing heavy coats to stay in this climate controlled room.
They're from San Diego, so it could have been like 62.
Yeah, fair.
Like, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the big line from this story is that yes, because all the servers were in San Diego and internet infrastructure was much less robust at the time, that yes, they consumed effectively all the bandwidth in and out of San Diego.
Yeah.
Took down a bunch of other companies' internet access as well.
Yep. So that was the dawn, like UO and EverQuest, kind of the beginning of multiplayer online paid experiences. EverQuest also had a $10 a month fee. And in addition to buying new expansions and all the other stuff that you had to do. And then around the time of the Half-Life launch, Half-Life Heretic, all of the fall of Quake engine games, I guess, is what I think of that as. A bunch of third-party services kind of rose up, and some of these had existed for a minute to service Quake. Like GameSpy existed as a tool that you used to browse the master list of Quake servers to see which one was closest to you.
Didn't it start as QuakeSpy before it became GameSpy?
Yeah, it was QuakeSpy first, and then it became GameSpy, and then eventually it ended up being bought by IGN and rolled into IGN and
becoming like a games press outlet.
Yeah,
on top of the server browser. Weird.
Well, the server browser went away.
Yeah.
GameSpy, the last thing I remember seeing GameSpy running was, I think, Wii. So there were a couple of Wii multiplayer games that used GameSpy services.
Oh, right. That's right. They had a whole middleware component.
Yeah. But so these became what eventually we would call middleware, right? They were portals that you could use to do the multiplayer matchmaking and all that stuff without having to build that internally. And they were things like GameSpy. MSN had one. Yahoo had one. Heat.net was one. The World Opponent Network, or the Sierra Online Network, which of those things were related, was where you played early Source Engine games or early Valve games, I guess, and mods like Counter-Strike and Half-Life Deathmatch and stuff like that. And those were like, it's weird because some of those were just pure multiplayer portals. Some of them also, like Yahoo and MSN, had like card games, and you could play Yahtzee and stuff with people from around the world. So you could always get a game of Hearts going on the Yahoo Games Network or MSN Games Network. It was a weird time.
You know what never goes out of style?
Yep.
It's Hearts. And EverQuest. I meant to say earlier, we got to give it up for EverQuest. Certainly the only classic game on this list that is still getting expansions to this day.
Really? UO's not still going?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think you've been able to play Ultima Online for a long time.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. What? Okay, no, I think I'm wrong, and this might actually be the second time I've made this exact mistake on this podcast, but I think Ultima Online is still running.
It seems like there's something there. Broadsword owns it now.
Yeah, a company called Broadsword appears to be running it now, and according to both their site and Wikipedia, something called Ultima Online New Legacy is also in development and was supposed to start an alpha test last October, but I'm not sure that it actually ever did. So I need to read more about that, because maybe the classic UO experience is coming back, and
you could do it all over again.
I could still give it a shot at some point, but
look.
Anyway, so UO and EverQuest, both incredible staying power, I guess.
Turns out once you have an MMO audience going, people don't stop playing.
That's true. It's true. EverQuest, literally like clockwork, every first week of December every year since it came out has gotten a new expansion.
Yep.
And there's another one due a month from now.
I mean, they named I think they named the studio that owns that now after one of the characters in original EverQuest.
Yeah.
So
also, the game's called EverQuest. Pretty appropriate that it's still going.
EverQuest 2, less so, though, it turns out.
EverQuest 2, I went to preview events for EverQuest 2. I covered that game at launch. It didn't quite do the same business.
It had real performance. But anyway, we don't have to get into that. But
yes.
Okay.
Real quick, into the 90s here. Let's just dip back into consoles briefly because I can't help myself. And I think it's an interesting parallel track because consoles were so integrated and so not computers back at that time.
Well, and it was interesting because like Sega was always hot on multiplayer, online, and Sony kind of ignored it completely, right?
For a while. I will say this is kind of a footnote, really, but the 64DD, which was the writable, the magneto-optical disc add-on for the Nintendo 64, which only came out in Japan, so this is why I know next to nothing about it, had a 28.8 modem built into it, which I did not realize. And apparently Nintendo got some ways along on working on an online gaming service for 64DD that never happened.
That seems unlikely.
And they were working with Netscape on it.
I mean, that makes sense.
And the reason for that, at least according to Wikipedia, the reason for that is that the management of Netscape had all come from SGI. And of course, SGI famously did the graphics hardware in the N64.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So there was already some working relationship between different people there. And so there was some progress made there. That never happened. The Dreamcast is a much more important kind of milestone on the lineage of video game console online multiplayer, though. The Dreamcast shipped with a 56K modem built into it. And that was modular and could come out and you could replace it with an Ethernet broadband adapter instead.
That's rad.
There was a version of Quake 3 for Dreamcast famously that had crossplay.
That's such a terrible idea.
You could play Quake 3 on a Dreamcast over a modem or broadband, or maybe it was just broadband against people on a PC.
You also could use a web browser on the Dreamcast.
Yes. I have no memory of what that was like, but yes.
It was a disk, just like everything else. You put it in, and then you could either get web browser 1.0 or 2.0.
Yeah, because there was no permanent storage on the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
There was a service called SegaNet, which I very vaguely remember, like the logo when I pulled it up. I was like, oh, I remember SegaNet. It's that blue and orange logo.
Yeah.
It was $21.95 a month. Apparently, like way more popular than I realized.
Well, so when you hear $21.95 a month for a SegaNet service, you think, oh God, that's way too much for an online service. But what you don't remember is that also included the dial-up service. So in the pre-broadband internet, you paid for your phone line, you paid for the dial-up into the ISP, and then you also paid for whatever game stuff you did. So it's like $21.95, probably the normal good 56K broadband was $15 a month would be my guess.
Yeah.
So an extra $6 to get online multiplayer for Sega games was a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems fairly reasonable, actually. Apparently, they had over 1.5 million Dreamcasts connect to that service.
That's crazy.
Which is like pretty fucking huge numbers considering the Dreamcast itself never put up very big numbers.
I wonder if they had, if you had to like if you did that to register the console. I wonder if that's how they got that big a number.
I don't know. The bulk of that was in Japan. It was about half of that number was in Japan, and then 400,000 in North America and 400,000 in Europe.
Wild.
But no, the other thing I never gave credit for, like Quake 3 is the one Dreamcast online game that I ever think about. But I pulled up a full list of compatible Dreamcast online games. There's like dozens of them. Like a few dozen.
Hit me the high points.
I mean, Choo Choo Rocket. Anybody?
That's a banger.
Choo Choo Rocket is an excellent game. There were Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2.
Of course.
Very, very notably.
And like unique to that platform too, right?
Yes. Sega Rally 2, Street Fighter 3, Third Strike. Like there were multiple fighting games. And there was a version of Unreal Tournament for the
Soul
Dreamcast. Calibur? I don't know. Soul Calibur was not online.
So the interesting thing about this, did you log into a central service? Did you like a username and stuff with this? You didn't.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I never used it. I never knew anybody that did use it. Like I was going to say, like everything else with the Dreamcast, this did not last very long.
Yeah.
Because the Dreamcast itself lasted less than 2 years in North America.
Yeah.
They killed it.
I remember I bought one, and then like 3 days later I got the, hey, we're not supporting this anymore. News.
I bought mine after that announcement. So I got everything for pennies on the dollar.
Oh, man, that was the right choice.
Yep.
I got Samba de Amigo. That's all I cared about.
Yep. That's like worth it.
Crazy Taxi, Samba de Amigo. I'm good.
Yes. Anyway, Dreamcast, like kind of weirdly is slightly ahead of its time on online multiplayer services on consoles.
So many things on so many things.
Yeah.
But then the millennium happened, and multiplayer came to consoles, right?
Yes,
That's
like
this is the big thing
in a more earnest way. Kind of like the Dreamcast, the PS2. The PS2 got Ethernet support, but initially I think it was definitely only through the hard drive add-on. The thing I don't remember is if you could buy that hard drive add-on separately, or I think you could buy it separately, but it definitely also came in a bundle with Final Fantasy 11. Like, that was a big launch. It was the big Final Fantasy 7 launch on PS2. It was like, you get this giant enclosure that has a hard drive in it that you shove in the back of your PS2, and it has an Ethernet port in it.
Wait, was Final Fantasy 11 a multiplayer game?
Oh yeah, yeah.
No, it's an MMO. That was the first MMO that they did.
Don't get me started. I think to this day, I said this at the time, and I still say it. It was ridiculous to just give it a number,
like make it a mainline game.
Yes, as if it was the 11th Final Fantasy game, but it's an MMO that has very little to nothing to do with the other games.
Well, but it isn't the whole point of Final Fantasy. Each one is its own game, and it stands on its own.
Technically, yes.
Yeah. Look, maybe the real game was the friends we made along the way, Brad.
Hey, check this out. Final Fantasy Online.
No, that's weird. Nobody would play that.
I think that would have been a perfectly serviceable name. But the PS2, like the Dreamcast, in fact, even more so than the Dreamcast, I don't think I ever gave credit for how many different games it had with online support.
Yeah, it was wild.
It is way into the dozens, if not over 100 skimming this list. Like, there are a lot of PS2 games that had online support.
Well, I remember, so by that time I was working at Maximum PC and Next Gen was down the hall from us. And I remember when they got a PlayStation, the first online PlayStation game that I saw was Tony Hawk, I think. It was whichever one has the airport level. And they were playing online, and like it was a moment. Right. Like it was a surprising weird thing.
Yeah.
And then, and then at the same time, like LAN party stuff was going still. Like Halo was really popular on the Xbox, but it was a LAN only game, and people built weird portals that would let you play with other people, like basically VPNs that would let them play with other people across the internet.
Yep.
What wasn't a great experience, is my understanding, and required some shenaniganry.
Yeah, that generation was on one hand, it was the beginning of online support for consoles in earnest. On the other hand, it was also painfully limited until right toward the end when Xbox Live came out on the first Xbox and finally kind of unified this across or at the console level. And we've talked about this with the Xbox 360, but PS2 games, notably, like I was saying earlier, like the network stack and there was no centralized account system or connectivity stuff on the console.
Oh yeah.
Like, you had to do all of the connection stuff for each game within the game, as far as I remember. Like, every time you had a game that you played online on the PS2, you had to go in and set up whatever account and set up whatever connection settings in that game.
Like, if you didn't use DHCP, you had to type in your IP address every single time.
Right.
Yeah.
So like there was just, in fact, I think that's probably a reason I didn't really mess with online stuff on the PS2 very much, because it was such a pain in the ass per game.
Yeah, it was shockingly difficult. That was the beginning of, wow, Japan doesn't understand the internet. Hey.
Yeah. But like certain games like SOCOM had a rabid fan base.
Yeah.
On the PS2. Like, there were some online games on PS2 that really made an impact. Like, there were a ton of online sports games on there. Like, there was a lot going on there, but the technology had not really caught up to the ambition yet.
But then the Xbox came out and Xbox Live shipped, and everybody got a little headset with it, right?
Right. Like, the Xbox famously shipped with an Ethernet port built in, the first Xbox of the 360. Like, they laid the groundwork by making sure everybody could play broadband on the console out of the box.
Even though it didn't ship for a long time.
Right. But then the service finally came along later on. And that was when, like, the modern online connected console experience really started to take shape.
I mean, I feel like that was, for me, that was Halo 2 and Mech Assault?
Mech Assault.
Yeah.
On the Xbox. Yeah. Mech Assault, famously the game that let you soft mod your Xbox.
Well, later though. Yeah.
Via exploits. But anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of, maybe flimsy ambition, we do have to mention the GameCube had online support, kind of, barely. They made a modem and an Ethernet adapter for the GameCube.
Did it ship with either of them, or did it have just an empty slot there?
To my memory, there was just an empty, like, plastic housing that you pulled out of there to make room for either one of those that you bought. I believe I had the list open and I have closed it. I think it's something like 8 games shipped with any kind of network support on the GameCube.
Yeah, the big one was Mario Kart DD Double Dash,
and I think that one was LAN only.
It was LAN only.
About half of. Oh, here actually, I've got it right in front of me. Yes, it is 8 games, and like half of those are LAN only, and the other half have actual internet support.
Yeah, that seems right.
Kirby Air Ride. Kirby Air Ride is another one.
I never played Kirby Air Ride. Is it good?
I didn't either. I also did not play it, but there's a Kirby Air Riders coming out for Switch 2 presently.
I'm a little suspicious about Kirby. He seems like he's up to some business.
He seems pretty wholesome, but
okay, so consoles around this time, Star Wars Galaxies came out, like 2003. Star Wars Galaxies came out.
Here is another of your Raph Koster, or in fact, perhaps the main Raph Koster connection.
Yeah, like this was. In retrospect, I think that the Star Wars Galaxy design was profoundly far ahead of what the technology and the players were both ready for, because everything was player crafted, right? There were a couple of settlements on each planet, but the game expected players to build houses and to build bars and to build the whole thing out.
Oh, I don't think I realized there was like building construction in that game.
Yeah, it was limited in some way because you had to there may have been empty buildings or something and you took them over. I can't remember how it worked, but like they expected the entire world to be made by people and for people to extend it.
That's crazy. That is, speaking of ambitious.
Well, yeah. And they made a Star Wars game where the way you became a Jedi was to have random chance touch you and give you force powers, basically.
Did you not also have to like grind and or get some unique item or rare item?
I think eventually people kind of reverse engineered how it worked, but when you eventually you would get a quest that would unlock a holocron, and then that would basically open up another slot on your character select screen that would let you create a Jedi character.
I never played Galaxies. I knew a few people. I was at GameSpot at the time who were way into it, but that was the reputation of that game is, hey, it's the Star Wars MMO where you basically can't be a Jedi. I mean, which I like on some level is fascinating. Like it's certainly true to the universe.
Yeah.
That a very few select number of people should be able to become a Jedi.
And like a lot of the roles, the game was designed so that like the combat stuff required people to work together in different ways. So like if you did too much combat, you had to go hang out in a bar and watch somebody dance so that you're like, I don't want to say it's like mental fortitude or something. So like one of your numbers would go down, you'd be able to go back out and handle it again. And
wasn't there a player dancer class?
Yeah, there's a player dancer class. So you were watching a human being stand there and press 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4.
It's incredible.
There were like I feel like there were food classes. I didn't actually, it's been 20 years since I played this and I didn't load up a wiki page beforehand, but yeah, it was wild. And it's kind of like, I've never played Black Desert Online, but I assume it's what Black Desert Online is like, or one of those like crafting MMOs where you're just building. I mean, it kind of reminds me of something like Valheim or Subnautica or something, but multiplayer with hundreds of people in the server.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it definitely not a power fantasy game in a big way.
Which I respect, even if it was not successful and did not catch on for obvious reasons, but
eventually they sacked Raph and sent him off to do other things. And they were like, yo, everybody can be a Jedi if you want, you just have to grind out this amount of time and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and they made a real path forward, and then it was never quite the same again. So, and
then they very hastily set about developing Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Well, that was,
which it didn't come out for years because it was somewhat troubled in development, but
it was a different studio too.
Well, of course. Yeah. That was BioWare and it was post World of Warcraft, which we're getting to next, but
yeah, I was going to say,
but the point is that was the game that was just lightsabers for days. I mean, it was just like, hey, you want to be this Jedi class or this other Jedi class? We got Jedis here.
Well, and just to be clear, like in the Star Wars Galaxies timeframe, EverQuest had like, hundreds of thousands of players at any given time and was viewed as an enormous success. Games like Dark Age of Camelot and Shadowrun, I think, or Shadowgate, I can't remember, Shadowrun. Yeah, there were like PvP focused MMOs, and there were medieval style MMOs and all these
Anarchy Online.
Yeah. And like the ceiling was EverQuest, which was 600,000 players or something. And then WoW came out in 2004 and lit the world on fire, and they immediately had like 4 million players and like it was completely
So there's your power fantasy.
Yeah.
Like WoW is your edges sanded off. Everybody's got guardrails to make sure they keep having a good time.
Look,
Tower Fantasy.
The spells had descriptions that told you what they did. They had numbers. When a guy had a quest, instead of walking up and talking to him and just saying the words that he said back to him until he responded to something, you had an exclamation point over a person, and you could click a button that told not only did it tell you what you had to do to complete the quest, it also told you what you got if you were going to do the quest. Which was revolutionary in the space.
World of Warcraft, obviously the first like true smash hit mainstream multiplayer phenomenon. Like I would
make the case that Halo 2 was probably that.
I don't think the numbers compare. Well, but I mean, that was not a game that was online only.
That's true.
I guess is the distinction I would make.
That's true.
Like plenty of people bought Halo 2 and never played it online, or maybe only did briefly or just here and there. World of Warcraft could only be played online.
I mean, I feel like Tribes and there were multiplayer only PC games, but not at the scale that World of Warcraft had.
Like, I mean, you tell me if this is a soft rubric here, but like none of those games had commercials on network television featuring like prominent celebrities. You know, that game was posting numbers like 8-digit player numbers that were paying $15 a month.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it was just, I think that game was at a scale of economics that no other multiplayer game had gotten to for multiplayer in particular. Like, again, I'm not talking about like what was Halo 2's like lifetime take.
Yeah.
In terms of revenue or whatever. But not all of that revenue came from Halo 2's online.
There was a time, like, to give reference, like when Quake 1 was really popular and a bazillion people like, and like you would load up the server browser, there would be like 2,000 servers that it would pick up worldwide, right? Or for your region. And like, it wasn't unusual for you to hop onto a Quake server and see like Blue from Blues News or like a developer, somebody with a developer name playing that you recognized, right? Because it was a relatively small community. By this time, it was it felt like a global phenomena.
Yeah. Yes. Like World of Warcraft, not too many years after it came out, had 15 million subscribers paying $15 a month.
And also, like, they had a rough launch. Everything had rough launches back then. But like they figured it out pretty quickly, and it seemed to resolve itself to the point that the game was really playable for a large number of people at any given time. In a way that wouldn't have been possible 3 or 4 years before.
I still wish I had bought. I don't know that I ever actually had the opportunity, but they sold server shards from the original like launch WoW servers at one time. Wow. I kind of wish I had bought a Ner'zhul server shard from launch.
That's pretty amazing.
So that was the server we played on at launch, and that would have been a fun thing to have. But anyway, like WoW is, you know, if Quake was like the first inflection point for multiplayer, I feel like WoW was the next one where like suddenly everybody in the world kind of knew what online gaming was.
I mean, there was a moment when there was a South Park WoW episode, right? Which was season 10, episode 8. It aired in 2006. So this was 2 years after Warcraft came out.
Like that game just achieved a level of cultural penetration that nothing had before.
Yeah. I get behind this. I still think Halo 2 was pretty important for online, but
I fully agree. But I feel like Halo 2 was important among people who already played games online. I think World of Warcraft was bringing way more people into playing games online who had never even thought about it before.
Halo 2 was also the first time I think a lot of people had experienced voice. It was the first big mainstream game that had voice, and it had both. In retrospect, it's funny because it had both team chat that worked over like your headset, like a voice call, but it also had prox chat in game. So when you were killing somebody on the other team, you could talk to them, which in retrospect is really funny to me.
Sure.
So anyway, WoW hit. The 360 came out a few years later,
or the following year, actually. I mean, a lot happened very quickly. In fact, I had forgotten Halo 2 came out like basically the same month as World of Warcraft.
Yeah, right. It was 2004 was a good year in retrospect.
I think they were both November. Let me just triple check. But yes, those games were like 2 weeks apart. Halo 2 and World of Warcraft came out, and then we did you should just go listen to the full episode we did about the Xbox 360 if you want to hear more, but we've talked at great length about how much the 360 did for online console infrastructure.
Well, how much it shaped the future of multiplayer games, really.
Or really just kind of defined the playbook for what a modern online connected console would be. And so all that happened within a year, like Halo 2 and WoW, and then the 360 all happened within a year or so. Like
wild.
That was the moment where multiplayer just went mainstream and stayed there.
Yeah, and then like the post 360 era phones took off and made multiplayer games a thing. Like millions of people are playing Clash Royale every day and games like that. The thing that's interesting to me is, I have a 12-year-old kid, right? And her expectation is that everything's multiplayer. Like she grew up playing games like Human Fall Flat and Minecraft and Roblox and Fortnite. And like when I bought her The Sims, she plays The Sims and she likes The Sims, but to her, the great failing of The Sims is that there's no way for her to share the things that she makes in The Sims with her friends, right?
If only The Sims Online was still running.
If only The Sims Online was any good when it came out.
Fair.
But like there's no, like her table stakes for her and her friends her generation is stuff like Peak and Bloxburg, where they make something and then they show it to their friends, or they do something and then they share it with their friends, and like to the point that even when she's playing a single player game now, she'll often get on a call with a friend and they'll have like windows in Discord with their video streams of the single player games that they're playing back and forth, which I think is fascinating.
That's all really interesting to me objectively as a kind of social trend. As somebody who like kind of effectively has grown up and aged alongside this medium, though, kind of maybe a little depressing. Like there are so many single player games that just don't lend themselves to multiplayer that like it kind of makes me worry, like if this is the direction the market is going, or our whole genre is just going to get squeezed out of existence because people don't care about them anymore because they aren't multiplayer.
I think the thing, like she still comes in here and hooks up the CRT and plays original Super Mario Brothers, right?
Yeah, okay,
there's a place and a time for everything, but like for her, like she would never play a single player survival crafting game, I don't think, because she wants part of that experience for her is I'm going to build something and then I'm going to invite my friend to the server and then we're going to go on an adventure together. Right.
Yeah. In the case of like a survival crafting game, I get it. I think I actually have the same reaction in a lot of cases there. Like when, that kind of silly parody game Escape from Duckov came out recently.
Yeah.
Like that's a single player game. It's not Tarkov. It's not like a first person shooter. It's a little kind of cutesy overhead game, but it's the same style of extraction shooter. And when I saw that was single player only, I was like, I don't know if I want to play one of these that doesn't have other people in it. So I guess I do get it for certain genres, but like, absolutely everything does not need to be multiplayer.
I mean, agreed. Like Stardew Valley is a good example, right? Because she like that should be a thing that she's into given the other games that she likes. And it's just, it doesn't present itself as the game that it is early on in a way that it just hasn't gotten to the point that she's engaged with it yet. So yeah, I don't know. Like it's interesting because I think you're right. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen her dig into something like, I remember when Fallout 3 came out, for example, and I played hundreds of hours of Fallout 3 because I'd never played an RPG like that before. And it was absolutely captivating. And I don't know that there's an equivalent that's going to grab her like that. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that Skyrim would do its magic on her or whatever the next Bethesda RPG is going to be. But there's other stuff that's happened in the last, decade and a half. But the big stuff, it's funny. We had like the table stakes for voice being part of the core. We talked about this with the 360 episode a lot, but voice becoming a core part of the offering with the 360 kind of squeezed out a bunch of games like Chrome Hounds. Like Chrome Hounds is a perfect example. It's a mech game where the game handled the in-game communication itself, but it made it a gameplay element. So like if you wanted to talk to people that were out of line of sight of you, you had to build repeaters, or you had to capture repeaters around the map and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like voice communication was kind of an asset that could be interrupted or taken away from you and had to be kind of regained through some kind of strife.
Yeah. And then that kind of went away for a long time. And it seems like it's coming back now. I feel like the rise of the modern prox chat games is kind of like Phasmophobia did this, obviously, but the for lack of a better term, the friend slop category from Peak and Repo and Lethal Company and all of those kind of build it in as a part of the core game experience now, which I like.
It's been rad seeing that come back and become a feature again, especially now that there's much better tech to facilitate, voice modulation and the types of things that make it fun.
Yeah. The other thing that's happened in the last decade is the crossplay. The rise of crossplay has been I think that's maybe a Xbox One/PS4 era innovation that really took off.
Broadly, yes. Although, as I rediscovered looking into this episode, Quake 3 and the Dreamcast kind of did it first.
I don't think that was a good thing for Dreamcast players, Brad.
No, my understanding is that it was a nightmare to play on a Dreamcast against people on a PC.
I can't imagine. I mean, look, even playing on a Dreamcast with a single stick controller versus people who were also in the Dreamcast and had the Dreamcast mouse and keyboard was probably a nightmare. Yes. I remember when Shadowrun, the game that was the Games for Windows game that was crossplay with the Xbox
with 360
and PC.
Yep.
There was nothing better than being one of the 18 people who had that game on PC and playing against all the console people.
Yep.
Just victims everywhere you see.
Yep. But yes, you're right. Crossplay has become much more institutionalized to the extent that there are this straight up middleware that facilitates it these days.
Yeah, and the multiple this is one of the reasons you see Epic Online services in a lot of games, right? Is that they provide a NAT traversal and crossplay portal that's just free if you're an Unreal Engine game or very low cost. There's also a bunch of other middleware things, just Pragma and I can't remember the thing that Microsoft sells, but it's PlayFab is the thing that like Helldivers used. There's a handful of others, but yeah, you can basically what would have been impossible in 2007 because the platforms wouldn't let you, and really, really expensive in 2017 because you'd had to have a 30%, like for Destiny, for example, they probably had a 30% DevOps team to maintain the servers that made crossplay work. Now you just buy your servers from Pragma or somebody like that, and you pay for their middleware, and you have a platform that allows you to do crossplay without really your people having to do anything, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Same thing for cloud infrastructure, for server scaling.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Like the online infrastructure that's out there to facilitate games working across platforms and allowing you to pick up save games from one platform to the next and all that stuff have become so much more accessible and democratized.
It's really interesting. Do you know what? Do you remember what the WoW server looked like? Was it a rack mounted server or was it a beige box?
They were selling it piecemeal. I think they referred to it as like shards or blades, which I think was maybe like one U rack each or something. I saw one at the Computer History Museum as well. They have one down there.
Oh,
which I want to say it was like a 1U basically server box.
Just like that, like
maybe more than one. It could be 2 or even 4. I don't remember, but.
But so yeah, like the difference that AWS and the rise of virtualized cloud servers went is that for a while everybody's doing all of their multiplayer infrastructure in the cloud, and then that stuff started getting expensive. And so now these days people do a hybrid approach where they, like, if you're doing hosted servers for your multiplayer game, you'll do like a handful to several hundred bare metal machines that you just buy and put into rack colo places around the world. And then you'll have some sort of load balancing thing that spins up AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Services or whatever instances as players, as like demand spikes. So that's why like a game like Arc Raiders can come out and have 350,000 people playing it on day one and not really have a lot of downtime. Now, as we've talked about in the past, often on those launch days, they'll find that having 30,000 people hitting their login server will jack things up. And that's the kind of thing you can't really find out until you launch. So stuff still does go down sometimes. But generally speaking, it's a lot easier now than it used to be.
Yeah. I feel like, we're coming off this month. Battlefield 6 and Arc Raiders were 2 huge multiplayer only games. Well, yeah. Battlefield 6 technically has a campaign, but you know what I mean.
Multiplayer game. Yeah.
Both those games launched. There may be a developer from one or the other game listening to this, like rolling their eyes, but I started to say like those games both launched problem free as far as I could see. Like there were certainly no headlines about like, oh, the Arc Raider servers are down again, or like they both seem to have weathered enormous initial player bases like extremely well.
Yeah.
And that's I'm not going to say brand new, but it feels like that's a lot more common now than it used to be.
Well, Arc Raiders had a little bit up and down time on Sunday, I think, but that was it. The last thing I remember that had a real problem was Helldivers, and I believe that was because the demand for that game exceeded the middleware's back end.
Yeah, the game is a bit of a special case, I think, in terms of expectations versus demand.
Yeah, because they expected to have like 60,000 people playing it and had 300,000 on the first day or something ridiculous. Anyway, that's also interesting because like in 1999 or 98, 10,000 people played EverQuest on the first day and brought down San Diego, the city's internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
These days, you have 300,000 people playing on the launch weekend and everything's fine.
Yeah, so, everything's a lot more resilient now.
And then the last thing I want to shout out is that people figure out NAT traversal. They do use servers to punch holes in NATs now. So in the 360 and Xbox One and PS2, PS3 and PS4 eras, you fairly regularly had to open ports. Not so much anymore.
Yep. Yeah, you would still see NAT errors on, like, I think Destiny 1, I remember on a PS4 seeing issues with that.
Is your NAT promiscuous, Brad?
Look, I'd rather not talk about my NAT's habits and preferences in public.
Look, man, there's nothing to be ashamed of. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, you're not wrong, although if we all just switched to IPv6, then this wouldn't be a problem anymore, would it?
I don't want my IP address. I don't want my computers on the public network.
Well, you still have a firewall.
I don't.
You still have a gateway and a firewall. You just, every computer, every device in existence gets its own real. I am not advocating for IPv6. Those addresses are.
I don't want to have to type them in, man.
IPv6 addresses are vomited up by Cthulhu. Like, those things are not meant to be read by human beings.
Yeah, it's bad.
But anyway.
I think that's it. I think we've reached the end.
Yes. Speaking of, I started to speak the infernal words. Maybe we should do an IPv6 episode, but I'm not sure either of us are qualified to do that.
I mean, it's basically just IPv4, but it's, infinitely larger.
Yep.
So non-comprehensive, kind of filtered through our experience, obviously, as a lot of stuff here is.
Yeah.
But I thought, like, it's interesting if you're young and don't know what it was like to play games on the internet in the 90s, or alternately, if you just have forgotten how much of a pain in the ass everything used to be. It's sometimes nice to think about how easy the kids have it these days.
Yeah. I mean, I have forgotten, like, doing this quick little survey that we put together here. Everything that we've talked about here is so established and so much just a way of life for people who play games these days that I had even forgotten how ramshackle a lot of the stuff used to be.
Yeah, I mean, you think about things like the big pitch for Steam initially, when Valve sent Randy Pitchford to E3 to have meetings with people and talk about this new Steam service. The pitch wasn't, hey, you can download games and play them on your computer. It was, yeah, we'll distribute your patches for you so you don't have to worry about that. So all your players stay in sync and like your servers stay in sync. And that, like, it was a problem. There were services you paid money for to download patches faster and bypass queues and all that stuff.
That was a pillar of GameSpot's paid service back then, was faster downloads for patches.
Yeah. Yeah. It was wild. And now a lot of that stuff's just easy, it turns out. So, I still also think about like early, like downtime for early MMOs like EverQuest and WoW before they had virtualized servers and server images and stuff like that. It would be like 12-hour downtime. I remember sometimes EverQuest patches would be 12 hours of downtime, and then it'd take them 3 more days because they'd jack something up and the servers would just be down that whole time. It's wild.
I do have a vague memory of big online games like that, like on big patch day or expansion day or whatever, like just telling myself like, maybe don't plan to really play much of this for the first week.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Kind of consider a release date plus 1 week to be the actual release date when you'll be able to just play whenever you want.
I feel like, and I could be remembering this wrong, I might be remembering one of the later WoW expansions, but I feel like the first WoW expansion was actually worse than the initial launch, because they had a year's worth of players who'd come in and dipped out and were coming back for the expansion.
I can see that.
Yeah. It was hard. Games are hard, man.
Yeah. Devolver Digital went out there on Twitter and Blue Sky. I saw they posted this both places out there. I enjoy their social media account on occasion. They went out there this week and just posted everything about making games is harder than you think.
They're not wrong.
Has been the repeated lesson of talking to people who make games for the entirety time I've been doing that.
Yeah, it's Rami Ismail says every game's a miracle, and he's not wrong. From getting people to give you money to make them, to ship, to building it, to shipping it, to deciding what it is, to getting people to buy it.
to efficiently making the dopamine release.
Oh, I mean, that's what Raph says. It's just about making things that make you excited about having dopamine come out, or maybe serotonin if you're into the cozy games, I guess. But you know what else will make the dopamine come out, Brad?
What's that?
Supporting your favorite podcast.
True.
Yeah. We're listener supported. Without you guys, we're not here. We're not doing this every week. So if you would like to support the show, you'd like to keep the dream alive. I don't know if there's a dream here. Sometimes I just say things. You can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod, where for $5 a month, you get access to the Discord, which is full of lovely nerds talking about lovely nerd stuff. You get access to our monthly patron exclusive episodes where we talk about ongoing projects and small things that don't warrant a whole episode, or just sometimes we just sit down and ramble about I mean, look, these days Brad's been asking me a bunch of Linux questions or telling me Linux answers.
You're an expert.
No, I'm not an expert. We're intentionally not experts.
I just saw the new episode came out today, and our clone was mentioned in the description. I'm curious to hear how that went.
Well, look, we can talk about that, but you can go to patreon.com/techpod and sign up. We appreciate everybody's support, but we especially appreciate our executive producer to tier patrons, including Jason Lee, Infelicitous Rips, Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Crimes, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And that will do it for us this week. We would love to know your favorite online gaming memories of times past. What did we forget? I know we forgot some stuff. I know that we're going to whack ourselves on the head as soon as we mash the stop button on this recording. So send a note to techpod@content.town and we will hit them at the questions episode at the end of the month. Until then, please consider the environment before printing this podcast.